What would you do if your own sister introduced you as just a distant cousin at her own engagement party? Hi, I'm Noel. I'm 33. And on the night that should have been a celebration of love and family, I stood in the corner of a luxury ballroom in San Francisco, sipping a half-warm flute of champagne, while my half-sister Serena pretended I barely existed. It wasn't the first time she'd done it, but it was the first time it made me smile. The venue was stunning floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Bay Bridge Jazz Quartet, playing something light and expensive servers, floating by with gold-rimmed trays. Everyone was dressed like they belonged in a designer catalog, except me, apparently. I wore a tailored black jumpsuit, clean, sharp, and quiet. No statement necklace, no sequins, just subtle confidence. Serena, of course, was in full bridal preview mode. White cocktail dress pearls and that performative laugh she used when people she considered important were nearby. She floated from group to group champagne in one hand, her other resting possessively on Troy's arm, the fiancé, with more ambition than sincerity. I hadn't even planned to come, but the embossed invitation arrived weeks ago, handwritten in a careful script. Not Serena's. Probably their mother's doing. Family Matters, it read. I almost tossed it. But part of me, maybe the curious masochistic part, wanted to see it through, to see her, to see if anything had changed. Spoiler, it hadn't. When I arrived, no one met me at the entrance. No hug. No, we're so glad you made it. Just a puzzled glance from the coat check girl and a server who asked if I was part of the catering team. I found my own way inside, and it didn't take long for Serena to spot me. She turned, blinked like she wasn't sure who I was for a second, then plastered on a smile so tight I could hear it strain. "Oh, you made it," she said, looping an arm around Troy. "Everyone, this is my cousin Noel from out west." Out west. We grew up in the same house until I was 16. I helped her with her math homework, taught her how to fake being sick to skip school. I was there when her guinea pig died. I bandaged her knee when she fell off her first bike. But sure, cousin. Troy gave me a polite, bored nod. "Nice to meet you," he said, already turning his attention to someone more relevant. I just smiled and said nothing. I wasn't here to correct them. I didn't need to. Because just 20 minutes later, a man with silver hair, a presence like gravity, and a voice that carried even in a crowded room, turned to Serena and said, "Wait, Whitaker." It was Harold Ashcraftoft, Troy's father, billionaire investor, chair of Ashcraftoft Capital, and the reason this whole event was more political than romantic. He stepped closer, eyebrows narrowing, as in Whitaker Holdings. Serena blinked, confused. "Oh, no, I mean that's her last name, but no relation. She's just a cousin." He didn't take his eyes off me. From where I held his gaze, New York, Manhattan. He paused. Then something shifted behind his eyes. I watched the dots connect quietly, precisely. You could almost hear the click. "Interesting," he said slowly, then walked away. Serena turned to me, flustered. "What was that about?" I sipped my champagne. No idea. But I knew. Oh, I knew exactly what was happening. Because what Serena and Troy didn't realize, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that Noel Whitaker wasn't just some obscure relative floating in from the coast. I was the founder and managing partner of Whitaker Holdings. And as of next Monday, we were finalizing a private acquisition of one of Ashcraftoft Capital's core subsidiaries. The very one Troy had been trying to use as leverage to impress Harold. But I wasn't going to bring that up, not yet. Let them circle. Let them wonder. Because the real shock was still to come. Most people assume family betrayal happens in a single moment, a loud fight, a cruel comment, a door slammed shut. But for me, it was a slow burn, a quiet fading, like being erased 1 inch at a time. Growing up, Serena was always the star. She was delicate, where I was, serious, charming, where I was skeptical. Our mother, Elaine, used to say Serena had natural warmth, as if I were something cold that needed to be thawed out. We lived in Palo Alto back then in a 3-bedroom home with olive trees in the front yard and ivy creeping up the side. Elaine decorated every room like it was on the cover of a home magazine, chintz sofas, antique mirrors matching curtains. There were always rules about appearances. Keep your voice soft, sit up straight. Never let outsiders know there was tension. Serena knew how to perform. She danced ballet at 6 won local pageants by 8 and had her own Instagram sponsorship by 15. I, on the other hand, preferred silence and spreadsheets. I started investing mock money in stocks by 11. I memorized compound interest tables like bedtime stories. When I got a perfect score on my SATs, Elaine said, "That's great, dear," and then turned to Serena and gushed over her newest recital photos. I didn't blame Serena for the favoritism, not then anyway. She just learned early that love came with an audience. I learned that love had conditions. By the time I was 17, I knew I wasn't going to fit into the family's polished narrative. So I left, got an early admission to Columbia. I took a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs and never looked back. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew they didn't notice I'd gone. Serena stayed. She graduated with a communications degree that she barely used, bouncing from one trendy job to another, until she landed in the arm of Troy Blackwell, a man with a glossy smile and a resume so bloated it had to be fiction. He was aiming for Ashcraft-level wealth, and Serena was the accessory that made him look relatable. Meanwhile, I was in New York building something real. Whitaker Holdings started as a private financial consultancy, just me and a rented desk in a co-working space. No investors, no fanfare, just grit, long nights, and the relentless hunger to create something that couldn't be ignored. By 29, I had 5 employees. By 31, we were managing 9-figure portfolios. By 32, we were the ghost behind some of the biggest strategic mergers in finance. I didn't post updates, I didn't share milestones, I didn't even go home for holidays. Because what was the point? My success didn't fit their script. I wasn't Serena with her flower crowns and carefully curated brunches. I wasn't a story they could brag about over rosé, but I watched them from a distance. Serena's engagement made local headlines not because of who she was, but because of who Troy's father was. Harold Ashcraft rarely appeared in public, but when he did, people paid attention. So when that invitation came, I knew the timing was no coincidence. What they didn't know was that I had already met Harold once, a year ago, at a private equity conference in Zurich. He didn't remember me, of course, but I remembered everything: his guarded curiosity, his sharp questions, the way he asked about long-hold, silent partners. I had just closed a deal that would ripple through his portfolio, and now a year later we were finalizing another, a bigger one. That's why I flew out. Not for Serena, not for family, for the poetry of it all, to stand in that room invisible by choice, to watch the puzzle pieces drop without lifting a finger. And as Harold glanced across the ballroom that night, eyes narrowing, expression unreadable, I knew he was finally putting it together. My name didn't ring bells at home, but in his world, it was an alarm, and it was only just starting to go off. The thing about power is, the real kind doesn't announce itself. It waits, it listens, and then at just the right moment, it makes you rethink everything you thought you knew. After Harold Ashcraft walked away from Serena's awkward dismissal of me, I noticed something shift. The room didn't feel different, still buzzing with soft laughter and expensive perfume, but Harold's orbit had changed. He no longer lingered beside Troy. His eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't looking. I didn't mind. I welcomed it. I excused myself from the clinking flutes and forced small talk and slipped into a quieter corner of the venue near the balcony. The breeze off the bay was sharp, bracing. I leaned into it like an old friend. That's when he approached, Noel Whitaker. Harold said, his voice smooth but pointed, "Manhattan, yes." I nodded slowly, offering nothing more. "I've been hearing that name a lot lately," he continued, stepping beside me. Whitaker Holdings. Some say they're the silent architects behind 3 of the most strategic mergers in the last 18 months. His tone wasn't accusatory, just intrigued. I sipped my drink. I wouldn't know. I don't read my own headlines. He let out a small chuckle, the kind that says, "You're confirming everything without confirming anything. I didn't realize you were Serena's cousin," he said with a raised brow. I smiled just enough to be polite. You'd be surprised what people in that room don't realize. A pause hung between us. It wasn't awkward, it was evaluative, like a chessboard being scanned mid-game. "Then I suppose I should thank you in advance," he said finally, "for what you're about to do." I turned, met his gaze fully. This acquisition isn't personal, it's strategy. Clean and necessary. Harold nodded, "But you'll still have 51% after the buyout closes." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He extended his hand. "When you're ready to formalize it, let's talk directly." I shook it once, firm, neutral, unflinching. Then he walked away. The silence that followed was louder than any toast or announcement in that ballroom. Inside, Serena was circling the crowd, trying to track down Harold. Troy looked uncomfortable, his smile tighter now, his gestures overcompensating. Something had unsettled the plan, and neither of them knew what. I watched from a distance as Serena finally caught up to her future father-in-law. She whispered something to him. He barely looked at her, just nodded once and moved on. A storm was brewing behind her eyes. Troy turned, noticed me near the balcony, and approached. His swagger had dimmed. "I didn't realize you worked in finance," he said, trying to sound casual. "I don't," I replied. "I build solutions." He blinked. "Solutions. For when other people's strategies are short-sighted." Troy laughed uncomfortably. "Look, I don't know what Harold said to you, but if this is about the Capstone merger, I cut him off. You don't have to explain, but maybe next time, do your due diligence before aligning your entire leverage play on an asset someone else already bought." His smile evaporated. "What are you saying? I'm saying the deal's done. You just didn't know who you were negotiating with." Troy stared at me like he was trying to reprocess the entire evening in reverse. "You're that Whitaker." I didn't answer. I just raised my glass and walked past him, leaving his question to hang like smoke. Back at my table, my phone buzzed. One new message. From my executive assistant, final signatures confirmed. Ashcraft subsidiary officially acquired as of 5 p.m. EST, holding at 51.2%. Confirmation letter sent to legal, right on time. I closed the message and looked up. Across the room, Serena was watching me, eyes sharp, smile gone. I gave her a soft nod like a ghost acknowledging the living, because in that moment something clicked for her too. She wasn't the center of the story anymore. She never had been. By Monday morning, the acquisition was public. Whitaker Holdings had finalized the purchase of Ashcraft Infrastructure Solutions, a key subsidiary quietly holding the patents and logistics backbones for 2 of Ashcraft Capital's most promising new ventures. With our 51.2% stake, we now controlled the vote on any strategic direction licensing or partnership. The announcement was professional, clean, no headlines, no drama, just a 2-paragraph press release through the wire. But in the upper floors of Ashcraft Capital's San Francisco office, it landed like a detonation. Troy didn't even get copied on the internal memos. His access to deal strategy was revoked within the hour. From what I later heard, Harold didn't raise his voice. He just stated plainly that leverage built on unverified relationships is no leverage at all. Harold reached out to me that same day, a direct line, no intermediaries. "Lunch," he said. "My office. You pick the day." We met 3 days later. His space was exactly what I expected. Dark oak panels, leather-bound ledgers, a view of the city that made you feel both small and important. He offered me tea. I declined. We talked numbers first, then terms, then trust. "I underestimated you," he said bluntly. I shrugged. "That's why I work in silence. No one sees the shift until they've already lost footing." He smiled genuinely this time. "I like quiet operators." We closed the meeting with a firm handshake and a shared understanding Troy was out. Serena would not be elevated through proximity. This was business now. Real business. The next week, I received a call from Serena. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Noel," she said, voice smooth but strained, "I just wanted to clarify something. Did you know about all this when you came to the party?" I paused. I knew enough. "So you showed up just to—" What gloat I let the silence stretch. "I came because I was invited. I stayed because I was underestimated." She didn't respond right away. Then she asked, barely above a whisper, "Why didn't you ever tell me what you were building?" "Because you never asked. Because you never listened. Because you only ever saw me as the spare." But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, "Because what I build isn't for show." Click. She hung up. No tears, no theatrics, just an abrupt end, like she finally understood there were things she couldn't manipulate even with charm and blood ties. Our mother, Elaine, followed up 3 days later, an email, short, formal. "I hope you understand that this has been difficult for Serena." She was blindsided. No mention of me. No congratulations. Not even a question. Just a subtle scolding cloaked in concern. I archived it without replying. Because here's the truth. They weren't upset that I had succeeded. They were upset that I succeeded without them, without their approval, without their applause, without needing their stage. And now that I had a controlling interest in the very infrastructure Troy's career was supposed to ride on, they couldn't spin it. They couldn't soften it. The narrative had already changed, and I wasn't interested in rewriting it for them. If I had been someone else, someone younger, angrier, or maybe just more wounded, I might have used my new power to embarrass them. I could have leaked it to the press, turned the acquisition into a headline, given interviews with just enough passive-aggressive flair to make Serena and Troy squirm. But I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted legacy, real legacy. 2 months after the acquisition, I filed paperwork in Manhattan for a new nonprofit foundation. The name came easily, almost instinctively, the Odd Cousin Foundation. It made me laugh the first time I typed it. It sounded like an inside joke between me and the girl I used to be, the teenager who got cropped out of family photos and talked over at the dinner table. The foundation's mission was simple: provide grants, mentorship, and financial literacy training for young women from respectable families who were told to be polite, not powerful. Girls like me. Girls no one expected much from. The first donation was anonymous $2 million from Whitaker Holdings, but I knew it would trace back eventually, and when it did, Serena called again. This time her voice was different. It was softer, almost shaky. "I saw the foundation website," she said. "Is that a joke?" About me, I didn't answer directly. I just thought it was time to give other girls what I never had. She paused. "You really think you had nothing?" I think I said carefully that I learned early on that love in our family came with conditions, and I stopped meeting them. There was silence on the line. Then unexpectedly, "I didn't mean to erase you, but you did." Another silence. "Do you ever think about starting over?" she asked. I let the question linger. Then I said, "Starting over requires both people to show up." And once again, she didn't. She never followed up, never donated, never attended the launch gala even though the invitation bore her name. But that was fine, because that night under soft gold lighting in a Manhattan rooftop garden, I stood in front of a crowd of 300 donors, leaders, and young women with fire in their eyes. And I told them this: you've been told to stay quiet, told that your power makes others uncomfortable, that success is only admirable if it comes with humility, with softness, with silence. I say break that narrative, rebuild it, because the world doesn't need another polished daughter. It needs unapologetic architects. Applause filled the air, real applause, earned, not inherited. The next day, Forbes Women ran a piece on the foundation. They didn't mention Serena, or Troy, or Elaine, just me and the mission. 1 week later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, No return address, just my name. Inside was a simple card. It took me too long to see what you were building. You never needed a seat at their table. You built your own. H.A. Harold. He didn't need to sign it with more than initials. I knew his writing, knew his precision. His silence said everything. Somewhere between strategy and legacy respect had bloomed. Not from blood, from battle. It's strange the way healing sneaks up on you. You expect it to be some grand event, an apology, a reunion, a clean resolution wrapped in closure. But in my experience, healing is quieter. It comes on an ordinary Tuesday, or in a sentence from someone who doesn't even know your whole story. For me, it came in the form of a young intern. Her name was Maya, 21, whip-smart with a hunger in her eyes that reminded me of myself back when I first landed in Manhattan. She was helping coordinate a financial literacy seminar at the Odd Cousin Foundation, where we had just onboarded our 5th cohort of grantees. I was reviewing notes backstage when she approached me almost hesitantly. "Hi, Miss Whitaker," she said, clutching her folder like a shield. I wanted to say thank you." I looked up, surprised. "For what?" She smiled nervously. For being the first woman I saw who didn't apologize for knowing more than everyone in the room. I blinked. "That might sound weird," she added quickly, "but I grew up in a house where I was always told I was too much, too opinionated, too ambitious. I didn't even know women like you existed until I read about the foundation." I felt my throat tighten, not with sadness, with something closer to recognition. I reached out, placed a hand gently on her folder. "Don't let anyone shrink you to fit their comfort zone." She nodded, eyes wide, and just like that, healing. Not from Serena, not from Elaine, but from a stranger who had never tried to erase me in the first place. That night, I walked home from the foundation office instead of taking a car. The city buzzed around me, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement voices and footsteps blending into that familiar New York hum. I passed a bakery that reminded me of one Serena and I used to visit during summers in San Diego. She always picked lemon bars. I preferred biscotti. We'd sit on the curb and eat in silence, sharing something simple before the performance of being family resumed. I paused at the corner, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. Serena hadn't called again. Neither had Elaine. Troy had faded into corporate obscurity last I heard. None of them were part of my world anymore, and for once I didn't need them to be, because the applause I used to chase had finally come, from boardrooms that once dismissed me, from girls who thought power came with permission, from myself. I still wear the same silver watch I bought when Whitaker Holdings hit its first 10 million year. It's not flashy, not branded, just a simple, timeless piece. Engraved on the back are 3 words, not theirs, mine. It reminds me every day. My worth was never defined by the invitations I didn't get or the names I was called or not called. It was built in the silence, in the background, until it couldn't be ignored. Final note. If you've ever been the odd cousin, the one they overlook, underestimate, or conveniently forget, know this. You don't need their validation. You don't need a seat at their table. You are allowed to build your own. And when you do, make it so strong, so undeniable, that they won't even recognize the blueprints. Drop a comment below if you've ever risen from the shadows they put you in. Like, subscribe and share this story if you know someone quietly building something extraordinary. Let them know they're not alone. Not.